Good evening and welcome, dear listeners. Welcome to tonight's mystery. A soft dawn settles over Carsley as Agatha Raisin stands before a toppled blueberry stall, its crates scattered like clues. A single jar of jam lies cracked open beside a body no one expected to find at the village fair. Agatha inhales sharply. Trouble has ripened early today. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from tonight? Are you relaxing at home, on the go, or somewhere a bit unexpected? Share your answer in the comments. I always enjoy hearing from our wonderful community. And do not forget to like and subscribe me for more mysteries every day. Now, let's get cozy and dive into tonight's story.
Chapter 1. A Fair to Remember. Agatha Raisin marched into the Carsley Summer Fair with the air of someone determined to appear far more carefree than she felt. Sunlight washed over the village green, turning the bunting into ribbons of color that fluttered lazily in the warm breeze. Children shrieked with delight near the coconut shy, dogs tugged their owners toward the sausage roll stall, and the gentle hum of chatter wrapped the fair in a comfortably familiar buzz. Agatha paused at the entrance, straightened her jacket, and told herself she was here to enjoy the day, certainly not to outshine anyone or prove anything. Yet her naturally competitive nature pricked at her ribs like a persistent elbow. She moved between stalls, inspecting handmade soaps, jars of local honey, and knitted tea cozies displayed with almost aggressive pride. The scents of baked goods curled through the air, tempting Agatha with every step. She took a moment to admire a particularly adorable display of miniature hedgehog figurines, before reminding herself that she had come here with purpose, and that purpose was to enjoy the day without letting her ambition get the better of her. Still, her eyes darted toward the baking contest tent more than once, as though checking whether her past entries had been mentioned by anyone. Eventually, she reached Edith Prowse's blueberry stall, easily the most vibrant spot on the green. The table overflowed with baskets of glossy berries, each carefully arranged as though posing for a countryside magazine spread. Edith herself stood behind the display, wiping her hands on her apron and greeting shoppers with her warm, familiar smile. "Morning, Agatha," Edith called, though her smile faltered for the smallest moment. "Lovely day, isn't it?" "Perfect for a fair," Agatha replied, leaning over the table to inspect a jar of blueberry jam. "Your berries look spectacular, as always." Edith nodded, but her fingers twitched against the edge of the table. "They do today, at least. Had a bit of trouble this week. Someone's been meddling with my crop." Agatha's brows lifted. "Meddling? How?" "Oh, little things," Edith said, though her tone carried more weight than her words. "Bushes disturbed, a few rows trampled, a handful of ripe berries gone missing. Probably nothing, but it's bothered me." Agatha felt a familiar flicker of interest. "Have you told anyone?" "No sense in causing a fuss," Edith murmured. "But keep your eyes open. The fair brings all sorts of people about." Before Agatha could press further, a sudden clatter rang out from the direction of the judging tent. People turned, murmuring as a table wobbled precariously, one leg bent at an odd angle. A crate had tipped beside it, spilling a small cascade of paper napkins that drifted across the grass. "Clumsy lot," someone muttered, though the air tightened with unease. Agatha studied the tent, her gaze narrowing. The table hadn't simply tipped. Its position looked wrong, as though someone had shoved it and then tried to set it back before running off. She scanned the crowd and spotted a figure lingering beneath the shade of an oak tree, too still, too watchful. The moment her eyes met theirs, the figure slipped away behind a row of stalls. She turned back to Edith, lowering her voice. "You weren't imagining things. Something's going on." Edith exhaled shakily. "I was afraid you'd say that." Agatha offered a reassuring pat to the woman's arm. "Don't worry. If someone's trying to spoil the fair or your berries, they'll have to get past me first." Edith managed a faint smile. but her eyes flicked once more toward the judging tent, as though fearing the disturbance was only the beginning. Agatha followed her gaze, feeling that same thin thread of tension weaving beneath the village's cheerful surface, a quiet promise that the day was about to become far more interesting than she had intended. Agatha remained quietly watchful.
Agatha fixed a smile on her face as the announcer declared the baking contest results, though the muscles in her cheeks protested with every second that passed. Second place goes to Agatha Raisin for her lemon blueberry tart. The crowd applauded warmly, and Agatha stepped forward as gracefully as pride would allow, accepting the ribbon with a polite nod. Inside, however, she simmered. Second place to Doris Tilling, of all people, whose sponge take looked as though it needed a good pep talk just to stay upright. Agatha held her expression steady, reminding herself that she was a mature, composed woman who did not sulk at village fairs. Much. "Well done, Agatha," someone called. "Yes, lovely tart," said another. She thanked them one by one, each compliment rubbing a little salt into the wound. The words second place rang in her ears as she stepped away from the tent, her ribbon fluttering mockingly at her side. She wanted to march straight home and remake the tart until it was indisputably superior, but she forced herself to breathe in the warm scent of the fair instead. It was a pleasant day. She ought to enjoy it. Her attempt at calm lasted exactly 5 seconds. Across the grass, she spotted Edith Prowse standing stiffly beside her blueberry display. Edith's hands hovered over a row of jars, her face drained of color. Agatha's irritation instantly melted, replaced by curiosity that pricked at her in a way competition never quite managed. She strode over. "Edith, what's happened?" "Oh, Agatha, I didn't see you there." "You look like you've seen a ghost," Agatha said, eyeing the jars. "Is something wrong?" She leaned closer, voice trembling. "It's the signature batch, the one for the judges. I opened the jar just now, and something's not right. The seal looked off, and the berries had a strange smell, like they'd been soaked in something—" Agatha stiffened. "Tampered with. Are you sure?" I think so, but I need a moment to check." Before she could finish, a sharp thud cracked through the air behind the stall. Several villagers gasped, and a few instinctively backed away. The sound was too heavy to be a dropped spoon or a toppled jar. It carried weight. Human weight. "What was that?" Agatha whispered. Edith shook her head, eyes wide, but Agatha was already moving. Her shoes crunched over the grass as she edged around the side of the stall where a fabric curtain fluttered in the breeze. Behind her, whispers spread like ripples in a pond. Did someone fall? Sounded like it came from the storage area. Could have been a crate, or someone pushing one. Agatha inhaled slowly, then hooked her fingers under the curtain's edge. "Agatha! Be careful," Edith whispered weakly, but Agatha didn't hesitate. Something was happening here, something deliberate, something wrong, and she was not about to stand by while the fair unraveled. In one swift motion, she pulled the curtain aside. A collective gasp erupted behind her as the fabric swept open, revealing the shadowed space beyond. Agatha froze, eyes widening at what lay inside, the afternoon sun dimming just enough to make the moment feel suspended, heavy with dread and possibility.
Chapter 2. The Body by the Berries. The village green looked entirely different in the early morning light. The bunting hung limp with dew, the grass shimmered under a pale silver mist, and the lingering sense of yesterday's fare, fried dough, warm pastries, fresh berries, had faded into something softer and earthier. Agatha Raisin wrapped her cardigan tighter around her shoulders as she made her way across the quiet field, her footsteps muffled by the damp. She hadn't originally planned to venture out so early, but she'd realized late last night that she'd left her favorite baking tin behind the judging tent. The thought of someone else using it, or worse, returning it dented, had jolted her out of bed before sunrise. The fairground felt peaceful now, stripped of chatter and clatter, almost meditative. Stalls stood like silent sentries waiting for their next burst of life. Agatha allowed herself a moment to enjoy the uncharacteristic tranquility. If only yesterday had stayed this calm, she mused. She still couldn't shake the image of the overturned crate, the scattered supplies, and the curtain she'd whisked aside.
only to have Edith insist she was fine and that the noise had simply startled her. Edith had brushed everything off with shaky laughter, though her hands trembled too much for Agatha's liking. Agatha walked past the jam stall and the children's craft table, breathing in the crisp scent of early morning. She nearly convinced herself that yesterday's chaos had been nothing more than fair day nerves. But then she turned toward the berry stall. A figure lay slumped beside it. Agatha stopped dead. The cold morning air suddenly felt sharper, slicing through her composure. She hurried forward, heart thudding, and recognized the shape instantly. "Edith?" she whispered. Edith Prouse was collapsed at the base of her ruined blueberry display. Baskets lay crushed, their contents smashed into dark stains on the grass like spilled ink. The table listing sideways made the whole scene look freshly disturbed, as though violence had passed through only moments before. Agatha crouched beside the woman. "Edith, can you hear me?" For a moment, there was no response. Then Edith's eyelids fluttered open, faint and broken like moth wings. She looked dazed, her breath shallow. "Agatha," Edith murmured. They took them." "Who? Took what?" Agatha leaned closer. Edith's lips parted again, releasing a breath that smelled faintly of crushed berries and something harsher, an unfamiliar tang that prickled Agatha's nose. "The blue ones. The special box," Edith whispered. Her hand twitched toward the back of the stall before falling limply to the ground. Agatha followed the gesture and noticed immediately that one crate was missing entirely, the one Edith had proudly shown her the day before, filled with her most perfect premium berries, polished and ready for the judges. Before Agatha could ask more, Edith's eyes rolled back and she slumped unconscious. "Stay with me," Agatha urged, shaking her head in frustration. "Oh, for heaven's sake, someone must be nearby." She had just reached for her phone when she spotted a second figure, sprawled behind the stall. Agatha's breath hitched. She rose slowly, half dreading what she would find, and walked around the side of the table. The dew-darkened grass glistened around the body, and the early light caught on the man's jacket, identifying him even before she reached him. Gary Wicks, the delivery driver. Known for his constant grumbling about late payments, damaged goods, and growers who didn't give him the respect he deserved. He'd argued with at least 3 people at last year's fair, including Edith. Agatha knelt beside him, but even from a distance, she sensed that the stillness was wrong, too complete, too heavy. She reached out, hesitated, and then checked for a pulse. Nothing. A strange scent lingered around him too, sharp, chemical, out of place in the soft morning air. It mingled with the berry stains near his sleeve, creating an unsettling contrast of sweet and bitter. Agatha stood, pulse racing, and fumbled for her phone. "Police," she said the moment the line connected, her voice steadying with purpose. "This is Agatha Raisin. There's been an incident at the Carsley Fairground. A serious one." As she spoke, she looked once more at Edith, crumpled among the scattered berries, and felt her instincts click fully into place. Something had happened here, something deliberate, something dangerous, and she was already in the middle of it.
Agatha had barely finished giving her initial account when the unmistakable sound of heavy, purposeful footsteps approached across the damp grass. Inspector Wilkes emerged through the thinning morning mist like an overfed thundercloud, coat flapping, expression carved into its usual disapproving scowl. He paused only long enough to glare at Agatha before barking orders at the constables behind him. "I should have known you'd be lurking about," he muttered, snapping on a pair of gloves. Agatha folded her arms. "I live here, Wilkes. I'm allowed to walk through my own village without filing an itinerary with you." He ignored her, crouching beside the unconscious delivery driver. The man hadn't stirred since Agatha found him. "Ambulance en route?" he called over his shoulder. 2 minutes out, sir," a constable replied. "And Mrs. Prouse?" Agatha gestured to Edith, who had been moved to a nearby folding chair and wrapped in a blanket. A medic knelt beside her, but Edith's eyes fluttered restlessly, her lips forming half-words as though she was trying to force them into shape. Every now and then the same phrase escaped her in a scratchy whisper. "Not the jars, wrong hands." Wilkes rose to his full height, sniffed the air, and then turned sharply towards Agatha. "You,"
Stay out of this." "I'll take that under advisement," she said sweetly. His nostrils twitched, always a good sign she had irritated him, and he stalked towards Edith instead. "Mrs. Prouse, I need you to tell me what happened here." But Edith only shook her head gently, eyes drifting towards her stall, the upturned crates, the spilled berries bleeding purple into the dirt, and the empty space where her prize-winning jar should have been. Agatha followed her gaze. "Someone took it. Your best jar, the one you were saving for the county showcase." Wilkes shot her a look. "Did I ask for commentary?" "You never do. You get it anyway." Before he could retort, two villagers approached hesitantly. Mr. Turner, who ran the hardware shop, looked as though he hadn't slept. Beside him was Claire Dunning, the fair's volunteer coordinator. Wilkes gestured impatiently. "Let's hear it then." Mr. Turner cleared his throat. I thought I should mention, I heard the driver arguing with Edith yesterday, by the stalls. Something about delivery fees." "That's not what I saw," Claire interjected immediately. "They were laughing, sharing a joke, actually, near the pie judging tent. I remember because I was jealous they seemed to be enjoying themselves while I was hauling clipboards." Wilkes raised an eyebrow. So they were arguing and laughing. The two villagers exchanged uncertain glances. Agatha stepped slightly closer, pretending to adjust her scarf so she could better observe the ground. The dew had preserved dozens of footprints, but only one set trailed distinctly away from the booth, deep enough to suggest haste. She crouched to inspect them, ignoring Wilkes's pointed glare. "Someone left in a hurry," she murmured. "Different size than the driver's boots." "Ms. Raisin, kindly remove yourself from the evidence," Wilkes barked. "I'm nowhere near the body," she said, which was technically true. He grumbled something about amateurs, then bent to examine a patch of trampled grass. As he leaned forward, he abruptly stiffened, reached beneath a collapsed bit of canvas, and retrieved an object. Agatha caught only a quick glint of metal before he slid it into an evidence bag and snapped it shut. "What was that?" she demanded. "Police matter," Wilkes said crisply, turning so the bag's contents were hidden from view. Agatha took a step after him, but before she could push further, Claire Dunning, who had been quietly pale, began edging backwards, not walking normally, but slipping away with the careful steps of someone hoping not to be noticed. Her eyes darted once towards the stall, then towards the path leading out of the fairgrounds. Agatha's instincts prickled. People didn't leave scenes quietly unless they had something to hide. Wilkes was still lecturing Mr. Turner about the importance of accurate statements when Agatha murmured, "Well, that's interesting." She watched Claire disappear beyond the hedgerow, a single footprint, muddy, narrow, and pointed, marking her path. And suddenly, Agatha had a very strong feeling this investigation was only just beginning.
Chapter 3. Rumors, Recipes, and Red Herrings. The bell above the Carsley village shop jingled with its usual cheerful insistence as Agatha stepped inside. The morning bustle had already taken hold. Villagers clustered in small groups near the produce bins, leaning over baskets with the purposeful air of people who had absolutely no intention of buying anything until they had exchanged at least 3 rounds of gossip. Agatha selected a bottle of mineral water she didn't particularly want, cover for lingering, and drifted toward the bakery counter, where Mrs. Blocksby's cousin Mildred was stacking scones with the concentration of a jeweler arranging diamonds. "Morning, Miss Raisin," Mildred chirped. "I hear you were right in the middle of that dreadful business at the fair." Agatha gave a mild hum that could be interpreted any way the listener pleased. "I happened to be nearby," she said. "How's Edith faring this morning?" Mildred's expression shifted, just a flicker, but enough to reveal hesitation. "Oh, well, I suppose she'll recover. Shame about her stand, though, and the situation." Agatha raised an eyebrow. "The situation." Mildred leaned in as though sharing state secrets. "Some say she's been under strain for months. Business troubles. That new grower from Charlbury? What's his name? Reeves. Rumor is he's been trying to poach her regular buyers." From a nearby aisle, Mrs. Jessup sniffed loudly. "Nonsense," she declared.
Reeves wouldn't dare challenge her reputation. No, I heard it's all about that secret recipe of hers, the blueberry reserve she only made in small batches, worth a fortune if you knew how to market it. Agatha folded her arms, amused. So Edith is either going bankrupt or sitting on a priceless formula. Fascinating spectrum. Mrs. Jessup sniffed again, which Agatha recognized as her version of conceding a point. Before she could ask more, a man by the newspapers abruptly cleared his throat and changed the subject with suspicious speed. "Lovely weather we're having, isn't it?" he announced to no one in particular. Agatha's instincts flared. People only changed subjects that abruptly when the real one was dangerous. She turned slightly to observe him, a thin man with sandy hair and the nervous posture of someone expecting to be interrogated. His gaze flicked everywhere except at Agatha. Interesting. But before she could sidle over, the door chimed again, and in walked Mrs. Withers from the post office, cheeks flushed with the thrill of new material. "You won't believe what I heard," she declared, sweeping toward Mildred's counter. "Edith had a deal go bad last week. Something to do with a wholesale buyer backing out at the last minute." "A deal?" Agatha echoed. "What sort of deal?" Mrs. Withers dropped her voice. "A large one, enough to set her up for months. She was furious, or so my cousin says. Slammed the phone down hard enough to jolt the stamp dispenser. Another rumor to store, another breadcrumb to follow." Agatha's water bottle now felt like an unnecessary prop. She set it down gently and made her way to the adjoining tea-room, where the warm scent of baked sugar and steeped Earl Grey curled in the air. Here, the tables buzzed with softer conversation, less frantic, but no less informative. She ordered a pot of tea and chose a seat with a clear view of the room. While stirring in a sugar cube, she noticed a man in the corner pretending loudly not to be listening. His paper was held far too high, the pages never turning. A stranger, unusual for Carsley at this hour. Agatha took a delicate sip, then raised her voice just enough to carry. "Of course, sabotage would be the simplest explanation," she said to no one in particular. The man's newspaper twitched. Across the room, two elderly women gasped softly. "Sabotage!" one of them whispered. "Do you think that's what happened to her blueberries?" Agatha didn't look up from her tea. "I don't think anything," she said. Not yet. But she was listening, and watching, and filing every contradiction away, because in Carsley, rumors never behaved like idle chatter. They were puzzle pieces, some warped, some missing, but always pointing toward something true. And if Agatha was reading the room correctly, Edith Prouse's troubles had roots far deeper than spoiled berries or a missing jam jar.
Agatha had always imagined orchards as tranquil little paradises, places where birdsong mixed with sunshine and fruit glistened invitingly on well-tended branches. Edith Prouse's blueberry grounds certainly looked peaceful from a distance, rows of bushes stretching across sloping fields, their leaves trembling faintly in the afternoon breeze. But the moment Agatha stepped through the creaking gate, she felt something was wrong. The stillness wasn't calming, it was muffled, as if the orchard were holding its breath. She crouched beside the first row. Several branches were bent at unnatural angles, their blueberries crushed underfoot. Someone had trampled through here recently, and not by accident. The broken stems looked deliberate, almost methodical. She brushed soil from her knee and scanned the ground more carefully. A footprint, deep, narrow, and angled sideways, marked the damp earth. Another nearby. Not Edith's, certainly, and too large to belong to most village women. Agatha pulled out her phone to photograph the impression, when something else caught her eye. A flash of color dangled from a thorny branch further down the row. She approached, pushing leaves aside. A torn scrap of fabric fluttered weakly, snagged tight, pale blue cotton. Male shirt material, perhaps. She held it up, rubbing it between her fingers. Coarse weave, recently torn, judging by the clean rip. Evidence or merely coincidence? Hard to say. Birds chirped overhead, strangely oblivious to the orchard's tension.
As Agatha tucked the fabric into her pocket, she noticed faint tire marks curving behind a cluster of bushes. The grooves were shallow but distinct, cutting into the soft soil before disappearing into denser foliage. Her curiosity sharpened. Who drove a vehicle this deep into an orchard? A delivery van wouldn't risk the uneven ground. She followed the tracks until they veered near a locked shed nestled under an old oak. The shed's paint peeled in long, tired streaks, and its padlock gleamed newer than the wood surrounding it. Odd. Edith didn't strike Agatha as the type to bother with updated locks. Agatha stepped closer. Inside, something shifted, softly, deliberately. A creak, then a faint shuffle, as if someone were adjusting their weight. She froze. "Hello?" she called, keeping her tone steady. "Is someone in there?" Silence. Then another small movement. Agatha's pulse quickened. She doubted Edith stored dangerous tools, but the shed's occupant, if it was a person, did not seem eager to be found. She pressed her ear gently to the wooden panel, hearing nothing but her own breath. Before she could investigate further, a voice startled her. "You shouldn't be here." Agatha spun to find a young woman striding toward her, face pale beneath the brim of a sun hat. Edith's niece, Lily Prowse. Agatha had met her only briefly at the fair, but she remembered the girl's guarded manner. "I was just looking around," Agatha said lightly, trying to understand what might have happened. Lily's fingers twisted together. "Aunt Edith doesn't want visitors right now." "Well, she did ask me to keep an eye on things." A half-truth, but Agatha wielded it gently. Lily glanced at the shed, worry flaring across her features before she managed to hide it. "Please," she whispered, "leave it alone. All of it. This isn't something you should get involved in." Agatha observed her carefully. "Are you in trouble, Lily?" "No," she said too quickly. I can't explain. Not now." She backed away, almost stumbling. "Please go." And with that, she turned and hurried down the path, disappearing between the bushes. The orchard fell still again. Agatha exhaled, shaking her head. Between the torn fabric, trampled bushes, and secretive niece, something was certainly amiss. As she stepped back toward the main path, a glint flickered in the distance. Quick, sharp, unmistakable. The reflection of a camera lens. Someone, hidden among the trees, was watching her, and they didn't want to be seen.
Chapter 4. A Jar of Trouble. Agatha had been thinking about Edith's missing jam jar since the moment she'd noticed its absence at the fairgrounds, and the thought continued to bother her well into the following morning. Limited edition blueberry preserve wasn't the sort of thing that disappeared without someone noticing. Edith guarded those jars like crown jewels, producing only a handful each year, each decorated with a handwritten label and a neatly tied lavender ribbon. Judges adored them. Collectors treated them like prized antiques. Losing one wasn't a simple mishap. It was significant. Determined to retrace Edith's steps, Agatha returned to the fairgrounds, now only half dismantled. Vendors had begun tidying their stalls, stacking crates and folding tables while chatting lazily about the previous day. Agatha approached the spot where Edith's booth had stood. The space was a mess of overturned baskets, scattered berry leaves, and a cooler pushed against a trestle table. She noticed the latch immediately, bent, broken, and hanging uselessly. She tried it gently. The metal dangled in her hand. Someone had forced it. Agatha stepped back, scanning the ground. Footprints marked the area, some fresh, most smeared by cartwheels and morning dew. Nothing distinct, but the cooler alone told her plenty. If someone had stolen the jam, they might have taken other things as well. Nearby, Miss Crindle, who sold homemade fudge, was wiping down her counter. Agatha greeted her. "Busy morning?" "Always is, dear," Miss Crindle replied, brushing crumbs from her apron. "Shame about Edith. Such a sweet woman. Terrible business." Agatha nodded. "Her special jam jar is missing." Miss Crindle's eyes widened. "Oh yes, I heard something about that. She was in quite a state yesterday. Said someone had been poking around her stand earlier, though I didn't see anything myself." "Did she mention anyone specific?" Agatha asked. Miss Crindle hesitated, worry knitting her brows. "Well, there was that row she had with her rival, that tall grower, Mr. Reeves. He came by in the morning. Looked irritated, if you ask me. She told him to take his cheap berries back to Charlbury and stop sniffing around. Agatha perked up. An argument? About what? Couldn't hear much, Miss Crindle said. But Edith accused him of stealing her berries, said her bushes looked stripped in places. He denied it, of course, but Reeves bought an awfully large batch of berries recently, far more than usual. I saw the receipt myself when he tossed it in the bin near my stall. A large purchase, Edith's missing jar, the forced cooler. Threads of suspicion tugged at Agatha like a persistent breeze. Do you still have the receipt? Well, no, but I think it's still in the bin, if it hasn't been emptied. Agatha checked, and to her surprise, found it still tucked beneath a paper cup. She unfolded the crumpled slip. Mr. Reeves had indeed purchased a suspiciously large quantity, far beyond what a small grower would need on short notice. She folded the receipt and pocketed it, scanning the area again. A vendor 2 stalls down, a young man selling handmade pottery, was sweeping his booth with unusual concentration. Agatha approached him. "Lovely pots," she said pleasantly. He blinked up at her. "Thanks. Didn't sell as many as I hoped. You were near Edith's booth yesterday. Did you notice anything unusual?" The young man shifted uncomfortably. I remember something important, I think, but I'm not sure I should say." She tilted her head. "Why not?" He glanced around nervously. "It's just, people talk. I don't want trouble." She softened her voice. "Sometimes the smallest detail helps. You won't get into trouble for telling the truth." He hesitated, gripping his broom. "I saw someone near her stand early in the morning, before the fair opened. I didn't recognize them. They were wearing a dark jacket, hood up. They walked off when I came closer." "A stranger?" Agatha asked. He nodded. "Didn't see their face, just saw them pull something from her cooler." Agatha's pulse lifted. "Pull something?" "Yes, something glass. Then they walked off quickly." The missing jar. It had to be. Agatha thanked him and turned back to the booth, her mind sifting through clues. Arguments, forced latches, oversized berry purchases, strangers at dawn. The jam hadn't simply vanished. Someone had taken it with purpose.
Agatha had just settled at her kitchen table with her notebook, the morning sun casting gentle slants of light across her cluttered papers, when a knock sounded at the door. She expected it might be a neighbor returning borrowed sugar, or perhaps someone from the village wanting news about Edith. Instead, she opened the door to find Bill Wong standing there, hands in his pockets, expression caught somewhere between concern and resignation. "Bill," she said, raising an eyebrow, "you look like you've swallowed a blackberry whole." "I need to talk," he replied simply, stepping inside as though afraid she might close the door on him if he hesitated. He paused in the hallway, glancing toward her living room. "You haven't been interfering too much, I hope." "Define too much," Agatha said, leading him to the kitchen. Bill sighed, though there was affection behind it. "Exactly my point." He sat opposite her, eyeing the teapot already waiting. She poured him a cup and slid it across. For a moment, the room felt calm, the familiar clink of spoons, soft tapping of her pen against her notebook, birds chirping outside. The calm didn't last. "I came because I'm worried," Bill said finally. "Well, that's new," Agatha teased. "I'm serious, Agatha." His tone softened. "The delivery driver, the one who died, he told someone last week that someone tried to bribe him, wanted him to steal Edith's produce." Agatha froze, her fingers resting on the notebook edge. "Steal? As in blueberries? Berries, jam jars, anything she kept valuable." He didn't say who approached him, only that the offer was tempting and troubling. "Why wasn't this mentioned sooner?" Agatha asked. Bill leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Because the person he told didn't report it, thought it was gossip. Only came forward this morning when they heard what happened." Agatha scribbled on a fresh page. "So someone wanted Edith's produce badly enough to bribe a man, and then he ends up dead. That can't be coincidence." "It could," Bill said, though his eyes betrayed doubt. "But that's why I'm telling you to be careful. Whomever's involved might not appreciate your investigation enthusiasm." "Enthusiastic? I'm methodical," she corrected. He glanced at her corkboard on the far wall, where she'd pinned the torn fabric scrap, several handwritten notes,
and, despite her best efforts to hide it, a copy of the suspicious berry purchase receipt. Bill stared at it a moment, eyebrows rising. "Methodical," he repeated. "You've had a busy morning." Agatha sniffed. "Observation is not a crime." "No," Bill agreed, "but trespassing might be." She waved him off, reaching for the sugar bowl. "I didn't trespass. I simply walked where the scenery allowed." Only you could make an investigating a potential sabotage sound like a scenic stroll. Despite his teasing, she could sense his worry. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Agatha, I know you're good at this, better than you give yourself credit for, but this feels different. Someone wanted Edith's produce before the fair, and now people are hurt." She softened a little, touched by his sincerity. "I know, Bill, and I'm being careful, truly." "I hope so," he murmured, lifting his cup. They talked through possible suspects, Mr. Reeves with his oversized berry purchase, Lily Prowse and her strange evasiveness, the hooded figure near the booth, even Edith's competitors from neighboring villages. Bill countered Agatha's leaps with measured skepticism, though he caught the faint twitch of amusement each time she stretched a theory a bit too far. "You do realize," Bill said, "half your suspects have no motive whatsoever." "Not yet," Agatha corrected, "but motives bloom like weeds." "Oh, groan. Please stop using gardening metaphors." They were still debating, Agatha mid-sentence about the forced cooler latch, when another knock vibrated through the door. Firm, slow, intentional. Agatha and Bill exchanged a look. "Expecting anyone?" he asked. "No." Agatha rose cautiously and moved toward the hall. A tall silhouette hovered behind the frosted glass panel of her front door, blurred but unmistakably still. Bill stepped behind her, instinctively protective. As Agatha reached for the knob, the silhouette leaned closer. "Agatha Raisin, I need to speak with you privately."
Chapter 5. The Niece's Secret. Agatha was perched on the edge of her sofa when a familiar knock echoed through her cozy living room. She didn't have to ask who it was. The small, hesitant steps of Lily Prowse were unmistakable. The niece entered slowly, shoulders hunched, eyes darting nervously. The sun had begun its descent, spilling a golden haze across the room, painting everything with the illusion of calm. "Lily," Agatha greeted gently, patting the seat beside her. "Please, sit. Tea?" Lily shook her head, barely lifting her chin. "No, thank you." Her hands twisted together in her lap, fingers nervously weaving in and out of each other. She looked like a woman carrying far more weight than her slight frame suggested. Agatha leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "You wanted to speak? I'm listening." A long pause followed, filled only with the quiet ticking of Agatha's wall clock. Then Lily's voice, barely a whisper, began. I've been hiding things. About the orchard? About Aunt Edith's business?" Agatha nodded, keeping her tone soft. "Go on. Nothing you tell me will change how I feel about you." Lily exhaled shakily. "I've been struggling financially. Bills, debts. I didn't know how to tell Aunt Edith. I was afraid she'd cut me out, stop letting me help with the harvest, stop including me in the decisions. I didn't want to disappoint her." There was a vulnerable honesty to her words that tugged at Agatha's heart. She reached over and placed a hand lightly over Lily's. "Everyone deserves a little slack, Lily, especially family." The niece nodded, eyes glistening. Then she hesitated, swallowing. "There's more. I saw someone near the orchard, before the fair, a person lurking. I didn't know who it was, and I was too scared to say anything. I thought maybe it wasn't my place." Agatha's mind raced, matching this account against the torn fabric and tire tracks she had observed. The story fit some details, but not all. The footprints Lily described didn't fully align with the ones she had catalogued. She kept her voice neutral. "Can you remember what they were wearing? Anything specific?" Lily shook her head, biting her lip. "A dark jacket, hood up. That's all. I didn't see their face." Agatha made a mental note to compare this with the early witness account at the fair, but before she could press further, Lily's phone rang sharply from her pocket. She glanced at it, but didn't answer. The display lit up insistently, the display showing a contact Agatha didn't recognize. "Someone trying to reach you?" Agatha asked. It's nothing. I shouldn't. Just ignore it." Something about the hesitation made Agatha pause. She nodded, but let it go for the moment. "Very well. And this lurking person you saw, could it be connected to what happened with Aunt Edith's jam?" Lily hesitated again, eyes lowering. "I don't know, but I think the real problem isn't just the jam. It's more complicated. I shouldn't say." Agatha leaned back, considering. Lily's nervousness seemed genuine, yet the slight inconsistency, the uncompleted sentence, the hesitation about her phone, all hinted at layers left untold. There was truth in her confession, certainly, but shadows lingered behind it. Finally, Lily exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "I just wanted no one hurt. I never meant for this to happen." Agatha's lips pressed into a thin line. Empathy and caution warred within her. She didn't push, only nodded, letting Lily feel heard. The niece's vulnerability was real, yet Agatha couldn't ignore the small mismatches, the hidden threads, the vague sense that Lily's story, while sincere, might not tell the whole picture. As the sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the walls, Agatha resolved silently she would hold this confession carefully in mind, weighing it alongside every other clue, because in Carsley, the truth had a habit of hiding just out of reach, even when someone bared their soul.
Agatha spent the next morning examining the torn fabric from Edith's orchard more closely. Its weave, its faint blue pattern, its slight fraying at the edges. She could almost feel its story whispering beneath her fingers. Cross-referencing her memory of the orchard incident and the villagers she'd seen passing through Carsley, one person in particular kept rising to the surface: Mr. Harold Finch, a gardener from the village who had recently been seen in the vicinity of both the orchard and the fairgrounds. The match wasn't perfect, but the color and weave of his jacket, remembered from a chance glimpse the week before, made her suspicion legitimate. She retrieved her bicycle and rode quietly toward Finch's usual storage area near the outskirts of the fairgrounds. The shed was tucked behind a cluster of birches, paint faded, lock scratched and worn, as if forced and mended repeatedly. Agatha dismounted, studying the scratches on the padlock and the faint tracks leading to the side door. Whoever used this shed had been in and out frequently, and not all trips had been official. Cautiously, she pushed the door open just enough to slip inside. A faint musty scent mingled with the tang of berries, fresh, but not entirely natural, as if they had been stored too long. Crates were stacked haphazardly along the walls, their labels unfamiliar. These berries did not belong to Mr. Finch. Someone else had been using his shed as a temporary storage space, moving produce with deliberate care. Agatha's pulse quickened. The evidence of misappropriation was tangible, yet the identity of the thief remained obscured. A sudden noise, a scrape, faint but distinct, made her freeze. Footsteps approached the shed. She ducked behind a stack of crates, heart thudding as the figures came into view. Two people entered, speaking in low tones, their faces obscured by shadow. Agatha's eyes darted, memorizing every movement, every syllable she could catch. "Did you check the other batch?" one voice asked. Tense, male, clipped, impatient. The second voice, softer, female, answered. "Yes, but you were right. Someone's been watching. I think they know about the jar." Agatha's ears pricked. The jar. So the missing blueberry preserve was not merely incidental. It was part of whatever scheme was unfolding. A crate shifted as one of the figures adjusted its position. Something small fell, a folded note, quickly unnoticed by either party. Agatha waited until the footsteps receded, then crept forward. She picked up the paper, careful not to crease it further. Its contents were cryptic, a partial list of names, a time reference, and a vague reference to collection points. She tucked it into her pocket, unsure, yet certain it would prove useful. The figures moved with deliberation, discussing storage, delivery, and timing. Their conversation hinted at coordination, familiarity with the orchard and fairgrounds, and a detailed plan for moving the goods without detection. Each phrase Agatha overheard layered the mystery further. They mentioned a lock, scratched repeatedly, confirming the marks she had already observed. The pieces fit, but only enough to raise more questions. When the voices faded and the shed fell silent again, Agatha exhaled, keeping low behind the crates for a moment. Her mind raced, cataloging the clues: the fabric traced to Finch's jacket, the crates of blueberries not belonging to him, the overheard mention of the jar, and the dropped note. It painted a picture of careful misdirection, someone willing to manipulate others and remain unseen. Carefully, she backed toward the door, leaving no trace of her intrusion. The sun had climbed higher, filtering through the gaps in the shed's weathered wood, and the world outside seemed innocent and calm. Yet Agatha knew better. The orchard, the fair, the missing jam, they were pieces in a puzzle that demanded attention, patience, and most importantly, discretion. As she mounted her bicycle to ride back to town, she kept her thoughts focused. Someone was orchestrating this from the shadows, using familiar places and unsuspecting people. And if she didn't tread carefully, she could be next in line for an unwelcome encounter.
Chapter 6. The Blueberry Heist. Agatha spread her findings across the kitchen table, the surface quickly overwhelmed by papers, photos, scraps of fabric, receipts, and the note she had retrieved from the shed. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, dust motes drifting lazily, making the room feel both cozy and conspiratorial. She surveyed the evidence, sipping a cup of tea, each sip punctuated by the gentle hum of her thoughts. Everything, from the missing jar to the trampled bushes, from the disturbed orchard to the overheard conversation in the shed, had a pattern, a deliberate pattern. She picked up the note first, examining the handwriting. Curved letters, tidy loops, and precise spacing. Something familiar tugged at her memory. Comparing it with Edith's labels, she realized with a start that the note mimicked Edith's style. Not her actual handwriting, but close enough to fool an inattentive observer. A counterfeit, perhaps, intended to mask whoever was orchestrating the theft behind a veil of authenticity. Next, she laid out the receipts and photographs of the crates. The oversized berry purchase stood out prominently. Whoever had bought that quantity had a plan beyond simple profit. Edith's limited production made her berries valuable. Combined with the careful mimicry of her labels, the stolen berries could be transformed into counterfeit jars, identical in appearance to the prize-winning originals. Agatha's mind raced. That must have been why the delivery driver had been targeted. Perhaps he stumbled onto the plan, refused to participate, and was eliminated as a loose end. She reached for the small map of the fairgrounds she had sketched after the competition. Paths between the booths, positions of vendors, and potential hiding spots were all marked. As she traced her finger along one route, connecting the blueberry booth to a storage shed and back to Finch's usual area, a realization struck. She had overlooked a detail at the fair, a cart that had appeared briefly behind the judging tent, empty, then gone when she returned to check. That route matched perfectly with the trajectory of the stolen berries. Someone had moved them surreptitiously during the confusion, using the commotion to mask their actions. Agatha set down the map and picked up the torn scrap of fabric. The match with Finch's jacket was now more than coincidental. It anchored one individual to the scene of tampering at the orchard. Yet the fabric alone didn't prove Finch's involvement. It merely pointed to proximity, opportunity. The real question remained. Had Finch been a pawn or an active participant? She tapped her pen against her chin, eyes narrowing at the receipt for Mr. Reeves's large purchase. His timing, coinciding with the tampering and the fair, suggested more than a casual interest in local blueberries. Pair that with the evidence of counterfeit handwriting, the stolen berries, and a mysteriously absent jar, and a motive emerged. Someone wanted to profit by creating fake award-winning jam, using Edith's superior fruit and her distinctive branding to pass it off convincingly. The puzzle pieces slotted into place with a sudden clarity that made Agatha grin. Her instinct had been correct from the start. This was not petty theft, nor a random act of sabotage. It was a scheme meticulously plotted,
executed with precision and designed to leave little trace. She leaned back in her chair, fingers still drumming on the table. Something nagged at her, a detail she had glimpsed earlier but discarded as irrelevant. Edith's prized jar had not merely been stolen, it had been used as a reference, a template for replication. The counterfeiters must have handled it carefully, noting the label, the sealing, and the presentation. That single realization illuminated an entire corner of the mystery she had missed until now. Agatha's eyes sparkled with renewed determination. Each clue, each observation, each overheard snippet of conversation was now a thread she could follow. The heist was clever, but cleverness alone couldn't outrun persistence, and Agatha Raisin had that in abundance.
Agatha marched purposefully toward the police station, her notebook clutched tightly under one arm. Evidence carefully arranged within its pages. The morning sun glinted off the windows, and she half hoped the warmth would smooth Wilkes's usual brusque demeanor. She found him in his office, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, and an expression that screamed skepticism before she even spoke. "Inspector Wilkes," she began brightly, "I have put the pieces together. The missing jar, the oversized purchase, the fabric from the orchard, even the overheard conversation in the shed, it all points to a counterfeiting scheme." Wilkes lifted one eyebrow slowly, the kind of look that made Agatha want to smack him and laugh simultaneously. "Counterfeiting jam," he said flatly. "Really, Raisin, you're suggesting someone's out there producing fake preserves?" "Yes, precisely," she said, leaning forward, excitement threading her voice. "They're using Edith's berries, her labels, and possibly her jar as a model. The delivery driver may have discovered it and—" Wilkes held up a hand. "Stop right there. I don't see any evidence that's more than circumstantial. You're reading far too much into scraps and receipts." Agatha blinked. "Far too much? Inspector, we have crates in a shed that don't belong to anyone claiming them, a note that copies Edith's handwriting, and the tampered orchard. That's hardly circumstantial." Wilkes leaned back, sighing, and ran a hand over his face. "Raisin, sometimes things are just coincidences. People see shadows and immediately assume there's a plot. I've been working in this village longer than I've been correct," Agatha interrupted sharply. Wilkes shot him a weary look. "Just leave it for now. Go home. Stop poking where you shouldn't." Agatha clenched her jaw but forced a polite smile. "Very well, Inspector, but don't say I didn't warn you when your theory doesn't hold water." She turned on her heel, already plotting her next move. Outside, she paused, scanning the streets. A figure disappeared behind a corner, a fleeting shadow she couldn't identify. Agatha filed the sight away as potentially relevant. Villagers often had their secrets, and she intended to uncover them all. When she returned home, the cozy familiarity of her cottage welcomed her, until her eyes landed on the envelope sitting squarely in the middle of her doorstep. Her heart skipped. She picked it up and turned it over carefully. The handwriting was spiky, uneven, with a deliberate flair. "Stop digging, or you'll be buried in blueberries next." Agatha's lips twitched, half amusement, half unease. The threat was playful-sounding, yet unmistakably meant to provoke fear. She opened the envelope cautiously, revealing a single sheet of paper, blank except for the ominous line. Her mind raced. Someone knew she was close, perhaps watching her more closely than she had imagined. She pocketed the note, resisting the urge to call Wilkes. Let him stew in his skepticism while she pressed on. That was far more satisfying and safer than announcing her suspicions to someone who refused to see the evidence. Yet she couldn't ignore the feeling that eyes were lingering on her as she moved around the cottage, even through drawn curtains. Someone had observed her comings and goings, had left the message to steer her away, and was likely still nearby. Her pulse quickened, but determination flared brighter. Wilkes may have dismissed the puzzle, but she wouldn't. If anything, the note made her more resolved. Someone was playing a careful game of shadows and misdirection, but she was far from intimidated. With a final glance at her tidy kitchen, notes scattered around her table, and the envelope in her pocket, Agatha prepared to continue her investigation, confident that the answers were waiting just beyond the next corner, and that she would be ready when they appeared.
Chapter 7. The Jam Jar Revelation. Agatha arrived at the village hall in the late morning, the air warm with early summer light filtering through tall windows. The charity raffle was in full swing, cheerful chatter filling the space, the scent of freshly baked cakes mingling with polished wooden floors. She weaved carefully among the tables, scanning ticket entries and prize displays with her practiced eye. Something about the arrangement felt off, a subtle misplacement of jars and trinkets that her mind immediately catalogued. Her gaze landed on a cluster of items tucked slightly behind a display of hand-painted teacups. A jar glimmered faintly in the sun's reflection. Her heart gave a small lurch. The lid looked familiar. She crouched for a closer look, fingers hovering over the smooth surface. Indeed, it was Edith's missing limited edition blueberry jam jar, inconspicuously placed among raffle prizes as though it belonged there. She bent closer, inhaling carefully. The faint tang of blueberries lingered, unmistakable and authentic. Agatha carefully unscrewed the lid, mindful not to disturb anything inside. Her curiosity was rewarded. Tucked within the jar was a small folded document, worn at the creases and carefully hidden as if by someone who knew its importance. She extracted it, unfolding the paper to reveal a neatly typed business contract. Her eyebrows rose. The contract outlined terms that would have effectively transferred control of Edith's orchard to an outside party, leaving her niece and Edith herself with little authority or compensation. One glaring omission caught Agatha's attention, a missing signature that would have made the contract legally binding. "So that's why the jar had to disappear," she murmured, eyes narrowing. The killer's interest hadn't been the jam itself. It had been the document concealed within it, a pivotal piece in a calculated takeover. Whoever orchestrated the theft had been meticulous, removing the jar from sight while ensuring no one suspected its true value. She glanced around the room, noting the raffle volunteers bustling with activity. One young woman in particular, standing near the raffle desk, had frozen mid-motion, her hand hovering over a ticket box. When she noticed Agatha looking, she turned abruptly, face flushed, and hurried toward the kitchen. The sudden panic was enough to pique Agatha's curiosity further. Something in that reaction suggested knowledge, or at least fear, connected to the jar. Agatha studied the jar more closely. A smudged fingerprint on the side caught her eye. Not a smudge from casual handling, but deliberate, hasty, the mark of someone who had touched it recently, perhaps while removing it from its original location. Her mind catalogued it alongside the missing signature. The fingerprint might identify the person who accessed the contract, the missing signature hinted at urgency or deception, and the sudden movement of the volunteer suggested awareness. As she replaced the jar carefully, making a mental note of each detail, Agatha allowed herself a brief smile. The puzzle was starting to take shape. The motive, previously obscured beneath layers of misdirection, was now clear. The killer hadn't been acting on impulse. They had pursued a tangible gain, a business coup disguised within a sweet treat. She tucked the document back into the jar, fingers brushing lightly over the smudged fingerprint one last time. The room hummed around her, oblivious to the revelation tucked in plain sight. Agatha stepped back, observing the cheerful chaos, the laughter and ticket shuffling, and knew that somewhere in this room, or nearby, someone had been counting on her missing it entirely.
Agatha arrived at the village hall that afternoon, carrying a basket filled with raffle prizes and a quiet determination that made the usual hubbub of volunteers seem muted. She announced she had come to return items mistakenly left behind, offering a reason simple enough to avoid suspicion. Villagers and suspects alike gathered, curious but unsuspecting of the purpose behind her visit. The hall, bathed in warm sunlight streaming through tall windows, felt like a stage set for her own private drama. "Now, let's make sure everything goes back to its rightful owner," Agatha said, smiling pleasantly, masking the sharpness in her mind. She distributed the prizes carefully, observing reactions, movements, and fleeting expressions. Each person received her attention in turn, each handshake, each glance carefully noted. She began with Edith's niece, Lily, who remained composed yet alert. Agatha subtly watched the room, noting who flinched at Lily's presence, who avoided her gaze. One man, standing near a table of donated cakes, stiffened noticeably whenever Lily spoke. His hands clenched the edge of the table, his posture rigid. Agatha filed this quietly in her mind, letting suspicion simmer rather than announcing it. As she moved through the crowd, gently questioning about misplaced tickets and forgotten items, another inconsistency appeared. A local vendor, Mr. Reeves, claimed he had been at home all afternoon during the time the jam jar disappeared. Yet when Agatha asked about his recent errands, he hesitated, glanced toward the door, and muttered something about running a quick errand, leaving his alibi unconvincing. Meanwhile, subtle chaos accompanied her orchestrated inquiry. A chair near the stage tipped over, drawing startled glances, and someone tried quietly to slip past the side exit, only to be intercepted by Agatha's calm but commanding presence. Each minor disruption revealed cracks in composure, minute signs of guilt or nervousness that would otherwise go unnoticed. Agatha allowed her eyes to drift over the room, taking in details others dismissed. A faint bruise just above a suspect's wrist, suggesting a scuffle or hurried handling of something heavy, a volunteer's trembling hand while adjusting the raffle box. The angle of a head turned slightly too quickly as she asked simple questions. Each of these tiny observations added to the tapestry she was weaving, guiding her toward the culprit. Bill Wong arrived quietly, as she had arranged, taking a discreet position near the rear of the hall. His presence lent authority without drawing attention. Agatha exchanged a subtle nod with him, a silent signal that she was ready. The pieces of her careful puzzle were nearly in place. Her mind raced as she considered timing and opportunity. Who had access to the orchard? Who could manipulate the shed? Who had the knowledge and courage, or desperation, to hide a valuable jar and the contract within? The nervous glances, the fumbled alibis, the subtle physical evidence all converged into a clear image she could almost trace like a map in her mind. Agatha inhaled quietly, savoring the moment before she acted. The tension in the room, the faint scent of baked goods, the scattered sunbeams across the polished wooden floors, all provided a calm backdrop to the storm of revelations she was about to unleash. Every villager was present, every suspect accounted for, every clue observed. Finally, with Bill Wong at her side and the suspect subtly trapped within the hall, Agatha straightened her shoulders and allowed a small, satisfied smile. She would begin questioning in earnest soon, but for now she lingered in the quiet anticipation, knowing the threads were taut and the net was ready to be drawn tight. The truth was near, and in this cozy village hall, beneath the cheerful chaos of returned prizes and murmuring villagers, Agatha Raisin was poised to reveal it all.
Chapter 8. The Blueberry Blunder. The village hall, still bright with afternoon sunlight, seemed unusually quiet as Agatha stood near the center, her notes laid neatly before her. The suspects and curious villagers had gathered, all faces turned toward her, anticipation dancing in the air like sunbeams on polished wood. Bill Wong stood discreetly at her side, arms crossed, expression unreadable but clearly alert. Agatha took a deep breath, letting the calm of the room settle around her before beginning. "Friends," she began, her voice gentle but firm, "we have been caught in a rather elaborate riddle, disguised as a harmless summer fair." Her eyes swept across the room, landing briefly on each person she had observed, noting the subtle signs of guilt and discomfort. "It started with Edith Prowse's blueberries, her prize jam, and a series of carefully planned disruptions." She motioned to the jar she had retrieved from the raffle table, turning it slowly so everyone could see it. At first glance, this may have seemed like an ordinary preserve, yet within it, hidden in plain sight, was a business contract. Unsigned, yes, but revealing a sinister plan. Someone sought to take over Edith's orchard entirely, using counterfeit jam and stolen berries as their instrument.
Eyes shifted uneasily, murmurs rippling through the hall, and Agatha allowed a small, satisfied smile. She motioned to the jar she had retrieved from the raffle table, turning it slowly so everyone could see it. At first glance, this may have seemed like an ordinary preserve, yet within it, hidden in plain sight, was a business contract, unsigned, yes, but revealing a sinister plan. Someone sought to take over Edith's orchard entirely, using counterfeit jam and stolen berries as their instrument. Eyes shifted uneasily, murmurs rippling through the hall, and Agatha allowed a small, satisfied smile. She enlisted, intentionally or not, others around them, including the delivery driver who discovered the plot and, unfortunately, became a liability. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Her gaze fell on a man standing slightly apart, fingers fidgeting, a faint bruise visible above his wrist. "Mr. Reeves, your hand slipped when questioned. You attempted to claim innocence, but evidence and opportunity converged too neatly for coincidence. The torn fabric at the orchard traced to your jacket, the crates moved from the shed, and your attempts to mimic Edith's labeling all point to your involvement." Reeves's face paled. His mouth opened and closed, searching for words, but none came. The room was silent, except for the faint shuffle of feet and the occasional clearing of throats. Agatha continued. "The delivery driver, loyal and unsuspecting, confronted you and threatened to expose the operation. When he was removed, you assumed it would silence any interference. Edith, too, was attacked, not out of malice for her personally, but as a measure to prevent the contract from being revealed before you could execute your plan." Gasps and murmurs spread among the villagers. Agatha leaned forward slightly, voice softening. Fortunately, Edith survived, and her sharp mind, aided by our own observations, allowed us to uncover the truth. She gestured to the contract and the smudged fingerprint. "Every detail you attempted to manipulate has been traced and observed. The overlooked raffle placement, the jar, the note, even the minor inconsistencies in your alibis, they all contributed to the unveiling of this plot." Bill Wong, standing nearby, allowed a faint smile to tug at the corner of his mouth, clearly impressed despite himself. Agatha's eyes met his briefly, exchanging the quiet acknowledgment of a plan executed well. She turned back to the assembly, closing her summary. "The Blueberry Blunder, though clever in conception, has been untangled. Justice, in its quiet way, will follow, and our village, as charming and cozy as it always is, can return to its summer rhythms, without counterfeit jam or secretive plots to disrupt the peace." A gentle wave of relief passed through the hall. Reeves, now visibly cornered, slumped in resignation, muttering a reluctant admission. Villagers exchanged relieved glances, murmurs of appreciation directed at Agatha for her thoroughness. Even the previously nervous volunteers straightened, reassured by the clarity of her explanation. Agatha allowed herself a satisfied breath. Loose ends had been tied, the motive laid bare, and the culprit confronted. The mystery of the blueberries, the jam, and the orchard's near loss had been solved, leaving the village and herself with a comforting sense of order restored.
The village had settled into an unusual calm by late afternoon. The fairgrounds, once bustling with laughter and chatter, now bore a soft tranquility. The ribbons on the stalls fluttered lazily in a mild breeze, and the faint scent of baked goods lingered in the air, mingling with the earthiness of the freshly harvested blueberries. Agatha walked through the grounds, taking in the serene scene, a subtle smile tugging at her lips. Justice had been served.
Edith was safe, and Carsley's summer had regained its gentle rhythm. Agatha soon found herself seated in her cottage kitchen, the familiar warmth of the room wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. Bill Wong poured steaming tea into delicate cups, the clink of china punctuating the quiet conversation. "I suppose I owe you an admission," he said, setting his cup down carefully. "You were right, as usual." Agatha's smile widened, not unkindly smug. "I'll try to enjoy it while it lasts," she said lightly, stirring her tea. She watched Bill's expression soften, appreciating the rare moment when his usually stern demeanor allowed room for warmth and admiration. The unspoken camaraderie between them was easy, comforting, and yet carried an undercurrent of playful tension that made every shared glance satisfying. Before Bill could respond, there was a gentle knock at the door. Edith entered, looking brighter than she had in days, carrying a small, carefully wrapped package. "For you, Agatha," she said softly. Her eyes shone with gratitude. "A personal jar of my finest blueberry jam. Consider it both thanks and a token of appreciation." Agatha accepted the gift, the jar cool and solid in her hands. "Edith, you didn't have to," she said, touched, "but I shall treasure it. And eat it, of course," she added with a small laugh. Edith smiled, a hint of something lingering behind her expression. "You know," she said mysteriously, "my family has a secret connected to these blueberries, passed down for generations. Perhaps I'll tell you one day, if you prove as clever as I suspect." Agatha raised her eyebrow, curiosity piqued despite the comfort of the moment. She glanced at Bill, whose eyes twitched at her reaction. "I suppose I'll have to remain alert," she said softly, savoring the interplay between suspense and the ease of their surroundings. Bill chuckled quietly, shaking his head at her ever-curious nature. Outside, the final remnants of the fair were packed away. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow across the village. Agatha lingered at her window, watching children run past, villagers chatting over fence lines, and the gentle sway of ribbons from the now empty stalls. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary. And yet, to Agatha, ordinary often meant that a new mystery was quietly forming somewhere, just out of sight. She returned to the kitchen, placing the jar carefully on her counter, and settled back into her chair. Bill poured more tea, their conversation meandering to lighter topics, yet Agatha's mind remained partially alert. A faint thought of a strange letter she had noticed earlier flickered across her mind, and she made a mental note to revisit it later. For now, though, she allowed herself a rare moment of contentment. Justice served, a friend at her side, a grateful neighbor smiling, and a village returning to its cozy, comforting rhythm. Outside, the warm light of sunset bathed Carsley in gold, and Agatha Raisin, perched by her window, with a hint of mischief in her eyes, quietly imagined the next mystery that might bloom among the blueberry bushes and winding lanes of her beloved village. The peace was genuine, the tea was hot, and the future, as always, promised another adventure.